समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
It would come to be called Pink's War, a name, I don't know, redolent of cocktails at the Bristol Hotel in Karachi and the scent of frangipani. 3 weeks after the regime of Amir Amanullah Khan declared jihad against the British in the summer of 1919, hoping to regain national independence, a Hadley Page V-1500 four-engine bomber designed to attack Berlin but then given over for joyrides to the Bombay elite lumbered over the Khyber Pass. 4 112-pound bombs and 16 20-pound bombs were dropped on the royal palace in Kabul. Air warfare had arrived in the region, and Wing Commander RCM Pink proved its foremost practitioner and theorist. For 54 days in 1925, Pink's fleet of Bristol F-2Bs and de Havilland DH-9As savaged Masood rebels in southern Waziristan. 2 British personnel and 1 aircraft were lost. There are no records, surprise surprise, of Masood deaths. This week though, a suicide bomber tore through a military convoy at Mir Ali, killing 13 soldiers and injuring dozens more. Troops in the region have been under relentless assault for over a year. 8 soldiers were killed in a similar suicide attack in Bannu in July 24. The losses of security force personnel, according to the South Asia Terrorism Portal, stood at 754 last year, the worst in over a decade. Faced with these attacks, the Pakistan army has tried to delegitimize its jihadist and ethnic Baloch enemies, drawing on theological terms in its official discourse to cast them as agents of fitna or strife sponsored by India. The story hasn't been particularly persuasive. There are, after all, no seminaries in India recruiting cadre to fight Pakistan, nor training grounds and fundraising rallies. The real story, as Pakistan's military-dominated establishment understands perfectly well, is more complex. After the fall of Kabul in 2021, enabled in no small part by thousands of fighters from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, jihadis began returning home, seeking to exercise power and harvest wealth, just like their one-time allies across the border were now doing. For the Pakistan army, these are potential allies, not enemies. For all the angry words, India remains the enemy, not the jihadis who have seized control of parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Like the colonial authorities did before them, Pakistan's military has been carrying out airstrikes in Afghanistan and using drones in an effort to degrade jihadist strongholds in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa itself. This pressure, it is hoped, will bring the jihadist leadership into line. Likely, just like the British did, the Pakistan army will discover that bombing enemies into good behavior is a lot harder than it seems. Hafiz Gul Bahadur, the man who publicly proclaimed responsibility for this week's suicide bombing, was born around 1961 to the Madakhel clan of the Utmanzai Wazir tribe in North Waziristan. Gul Bahadur's family claims direct descent from Mirza Ali Khan Wazir, the fakir of EP, who led a long campaign against the British. Following independence in 1947, the fakir continued his campaign for autonomous power in tribal lands, which were now in Pakistan. The Pakistan Air Force infamously bombed his forces in 1949 in Moghalgai, killing many people. Little is known about Gul Bahadur's early life, though he must have heard these stories from his grandparents and village elders. He is reputed to have studied at a seminary in Multan, earning the title of Hafiz, or one who can recite the Quran from memory, a distinction he incidentally shares with Field Marshal Asim Munir. Following this, he became an activist for the theocratic Jamiat Ulema-e-Islam party, which is headed by a politician, Fazlur Rahman. Gul Bahadur emerged into prominence in the years after 9/11 when he fled south across the Afghan border in the face of the collapse of the Taliban's first Islamic emirate. Together with hundreds of Uzbek and Chechen fighters linked to Al-Qaeda, Gul founded a base in North Waziristan. Islamabad quietly encouraged the formations of these mini emirates on its territory, but pushed their leaders to expel the foreign fighters within their fold. This, journalist Daud Khatak has written, led to a series of peace deals from 2004 with prominent jihadists like Nek Mohammad Wazir, Baitullah Masood and Mullah Fazlullah. The state even proved willing to cede its legal authority to some jihadists, for example enforcing the Sharia-based Nizam-e-Adal regulation in Swat in 2009. Few of these deals lasted though, Khatak notes, in part because jihadist commanders were unwilling to give up their core of foreign fighters to the Americans, and because of arguments over revenues from kidnapping, extortion and protection money rackets. The drone warfare campaign conducted against Al-Qaeda by the United States with Islamabad's assent further infuriated the Pakistan Army's client jihadists. Gul, for his part, continued to use North Waziristan as a staging ground for attacks against Americans and Afghan forces, promising only that he would not target the Pakistan Army. That agreement fell apart too, and in 2012, Gul barred the government from conducting polio vaccinations in his territories. Gul, scholar Didier Chaudet notes, argued that drone strikes were killing far more people than those being claimed by the polio virus. Then, in 2014, under intense pressure from the United States, the Pakistan Army launched Zarb-e-Azb, a massive military operation backed by air power intended to destroy these groups, which, as you'll know, had by then coalesced into what was called the Tehreek-e-Taliban. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP, lost hundreds, perhaps thousands of men in the fighting, but most succeeded in fleeing north, where they received sanctuary from powerful Taliban leaders like the current second in command of the Taliban's second Islamic emirate in Kabul, Sirajuddin Haqqani. The fall of Kabul, greeted as a great victory for Pakistan, actually ended up creating new problems for the force. A generation of semi-educated but prospectless youth with no life experience other than that of permanent jihad began returning home from Afghanistan. Like it did the last time, the Pakistan Army saw these new forces as allies. Allies against who? Against the new Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, founded in 2014 by a group of students to demand an end to extrajudicial executions and the alliance between jihadists and states. The leaders of the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, or PTM, were incarcerated and the organization was proscribed last year. Leaders of the jihadists, though, began seeing themselves as more than mere clients of the military. From mid-2023, analyst Ricardo Vale has written, a welter of small groups, among them the Jabhat Ansar al-Mahdi Khorasan, Majlis-e-Askari, Jabhat al-Junud al-Mahdi and the Jaish-e-Fursan-e-Muhammad, the names don't matter, began to coalesce around Gul. Last year, Gul's organization laid out formal rules for governance in the expanding territory it controls, including rules on the collection of religious donations and taxes, a prohibition on shaving, and dress codes for women. Videos have regularly emerged over the last year of TTP jihadists checking the identities of passengers on roads through the region and taxing trucks. For three reasons, Field Marshal Asim Munir likely views this as an acceptable price to pay for his broader strategic objectives. First, the TTP has deep ties with the global jihadist movement, which is now resurgent across much of Africa and the Middle East. As the scholar Antonio Giustosi has written, Pakistan's intelligence services allowed Al-Qaeda some freedom of operation after 2019, seeing it as an asset in Kashmir and other parts of India. Earlier phases of cooperation between the Inter-Services Intelligence Directorate and Al-Qaeda were also seen, Giustosi notes, prior to the killing of Al-Qaeda chief Osama bin Laden and then again in 2014. The ISI also cooperated fitfully with elements of the Islamic State hoping they might prove useful eventually against India. So that's one reason. A second important role played by the jihadis is that they serve as assets in containing secular democratic struggles for greater democracy and human rights in Pakistan. The rise of movements like the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement and the Balok Yakjehti Committee represents a new force in Pakistani politics, which is using constitutionalism as a weapon against the military's chokehold on power. Terror, in the military's imagination, is a necessary tool to ensure this new generation of young democrats do not succeed in seizing the rights and freedoms that they aspire to. Finally, a deal with jihadis in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa will help consolidate Field Marshal Munir's credentials as a defender of Islam and Pakistan's religious identity. This objective is also evident in Punjab, where Munir has been silent on violence against religious minorities and the killings of alleged perpetrators of blasphemy. This general isn't just a military leader, he's an ideologue. As a long succession of generals before him learned, however, co-optation of Pakistani jihadism is a dangerous and mostly short-lived enterprise. General Pervez Musharraf tried the same game and found himself targeted at least 4 times for assassination during his tenure, and by the very people his intelligence services had once patronized. General Rahil Sharif, architect of many of the peace deals with the TTP, found himself forced to go to war in 2014. And the fall of Kabul, General Qamar Javed Bajwa soon discovered, exposed Pakistan to more dangers than were solved, with jihadis returning home armed with large stockpiles of advanced weapons as well as their ideological ambitions. The only option to this perilous course, though, is opening Pakistan's troubled border regions to genuine democracy. And that's one step too far for this Field Marshal or any other. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.